What's up, everybody? Dude Anonymous here, bringing you another build guide. Probably the last one I'm going to make for this season of Torchlight Infinite. It started with a pretty simple idea. I took Elemental Whirl, which adds at base up to 80% of physical damage to your main hand weapon, to base ailment damage, which includes all ailments. So it'll add this damage to the base ailment damage for every ailment you inflict, and then the notable passive, Dirty Tricks, so you're guaranteed to inflict every ailment on hit. And then, so basically, the idea was to make a dot build that no one else was doing with these two things as a combination, see how it worked out. Unfortunately, the damage isn't quite where I wanted it to be, but I figured I'd show it to you guys because it makes a pretty decent T7 um, farming build. So alright, let's just get right into it. We're going to start with the skills, because that's the best place to start, I think. Alright, so I decided to do a cast while channeling build to do this, because I just like playing one-button builds, so hopefully you do too. If you're watching my stuff, that's probably what you're watching it for, because this is probably the kind of thing I'm going to do. So our one button that we use mostly is Path of Flames with Periodic Burst, Guard, Efficient Cast, and Quick Mobility. Blink, so we can get over walls mostly, or get out of danger quickly, with Efficient Cast, Quick Mobility, and Cost Conversion, because we don't have a lot of mana. Compound Potion with Emergency Restoration, Cooldown Reduction, and Armor Infusion. These are my basic three that I put on Compound Potion. Forced Start, because we want to be regenerating Energy Shield as much as possible, with cooldown reduction, Iron Fortification for that extra armor, and Cost Conversion, because again we just don't have the mana. And this slot is kind of irrelevant. I barely ever use it, but I think you want an extra defense sometimes, because the truth is this build is very squishy. It's Stone Skin with Iron Fortification, Extended Duration, and Cost Conversion, again because we just don't have the mana. I'm not sure if there's something we could put here that would buff us, that make us deal more damage or not. I haven't really played around with that because I don't think spell damage goes towards your ailment damage, but I could be wrong on that. But like any other one-button build, you're going to need to do cast while channeling and precise cast while channeling, so that you can cast something that you want on enemies without touching it. So our cast while channeling is with Entangled Pain, with Abysmal Hatred, just to make the curse a little stronger, because it is weakened by the cast while channeling, with Restrain, due to our low mana and our lack of energy use as it is. We're able to get a lot of stuff wherever we want it. For our three auras, we use Precise Deep Pain, Precise Projectiles, because this will give me dot damage to every single ailment, and same with Precise Projectiles. It gives you ailment damage dealt by projectiles. So we're going to use a projectile skill on our Precise cast while channeling to get this ailment damage across the board. Obviously we need Restrain just to get that sealed mana down. And then I got Magical Source to level 15 for mana regeneration, so that you can constantly cast your Path of Flames. And our Precise cast while channeling, we are using Chromatic Shot, specifically using this one actually because it always fires 3 projectiles, I believe. Oh no, yeah. Where does it say that? Yeah, it launches multiple projectiles. It always shoots 3 projectiles, and the projectiles can hit the same target, so you can actually get 3 stacks of ailments from one cast if you're standing on your target. So that's where you'll get the bigger damage numbers. Unfortunately, you're so squishy that you don't really always want to be standing on them. Through much experimentation, I found these to be the best supports for Chromatic Shot. Ailment Termination, because you actually get this plus 13.9 additional damage for the ailments, for each ailment, and you give all ailments, so it ends up being pretty high addition. Slow projectiles and wind projectiles, they give a large amount of ailment damage. They're just great for ailments, and they are only projectile supports. And then I experimented with, like, specifically for getting an extra ignite or the bleed damage supports, and they weren't as high of damage as using something like Cataclysm in order to increase your affliction effectiveness is going to be your best final support. And then we'll go right into equipment. The best for your helmet slot is going to be a Fool's Crown. You actually, in order to get higher damage than I have, you will want the corrosion on the physical damage to the main hand weapon to scale your ailment damage even higher. We are using Twilight Vestment. We have the corrosion on elemental resist, which only gives you like 3 resist over max, so it's not probably what you want. You probably want more gear energy shield, if I'm being honest, but I haven't really messed around with this piece because I just had this, so I used it. The important thing is here, whenever you reap, your energy shield will start charging immediately, and you want your energy shield to be charging basically all the time in order to get some extra defenses. Chain behind the curtain. Basically the biggest thing this does for us is we get 6 points of blur rating for every 3 meters of movement, so we constantly have 100 blur rating, which is very important because that's our biggest defensive layer, and it gives us 30% additional ailment damage, as you'll see when we do the skill tree. If you were to get a corrosion on this, that would be very costly. It would be on this affix, blur gains an additional effect plus 1 affliction inflicted per second for every blur rating, not because of anything to do with affliction, because you will basically inflict 50 affliction per second that you need to, but it will give you more blur rating effect, which gives you another 15% chance to ignore damage on top of your 30, which gives you 45, plus what your boots will do will give you over 50% chance to ignore damage. Torturer's Touch is basically our item that gives us a reap once per second, because you'll reap 0.5 seconds of dot damage against nearby enemies with full affliction, and it has a 0.5 second cooldown, so it can happen every half second. But basically you're going to deal 50 affliction per second, and you need the corrosion. Reaping removes 50% affliction from enemies instead of removes all affliction, because then you do not, if you don't leave 50% affliction on an enemy, that half second of dot damage that you do, or second of dot damage that you do, will not have any affliction bonus, because you will clear the affliction, then you will inflict 100 affliction, and then you won't have any affliction bonus. So it's important. This is actually a huge damage booster to this build, because it keeps affliction on the enemies, which increases our dot damage. For our Infinity, it is important to use Great Strength, because you get 35% additional main hand weapon damage, which scales into all of our base ailment damages. I think Blur Effect is huge, because that gives you another it'll give you another 6% chance to avoid damage, because it'll be 0.3% times, the 20% effectiveness, 120 blur rating, essentially. And then elemental damage gives you damage. The regenerate didn't really do anything. It was just, what really drove me to this was I wanted lightning resist, blur effect, and great strength. Great strength corroded on the belt would be huge, because it would give you even more main hand weapon damage. Also, it's worth noting that attack speed doesn't matter because you're casting, so you're lowering your attack speed has no negative effects on this build. Power battled greaves are a huge defensive layer. We do not want our energy shield charge to be interrupted, so getting it so that it's not interrupted when our energy shield is below 71%, that means that we constantly have this 14% chance to avoid damage, on top of our 36 from blur, because we don't have the corrosion on our amulet, so that it ends up being 50% chance to avoid damage while we're recharging our energy shield. Plus this 40% movement and some cold resist, and just in general we're getting energy shield, which obviously if you're going for recharging your energy shield, you need energy shield, which most of our equipment is energy shield, except our helmet is armor. I've played around with the rings a little bit. I don't think crafted rings will give you as much as double traceless pain will with the corrosion on the dot damage, because that's a big damage boost. Plus you get skill duration, which is increased to your damage. And this reaps 5 seconds when dealing dot damage. Ends up being reaps 10 seconds when you stack it twice. So your initial 10-second reap will actually kill a lot of mobs while you're mapping. So even if you find something that you can put in this build that gives you more damage than this is probably what you want for mapping, just for quicker clearing. And then it gives you some resistance too. We're very lacking in resistance on this build. We're sitting at max cold, but around 50 lightning and fire, like not really able to get it much as we want, and negative erosion. It's unfortunately where it sits, but we do alright with ignoring damage. Your elemental whirl, you actually want the corrosion on physical damage of the main hand weapon to base ailment. The one time I hit it at minimum, because you can get it up to between 100 and 120, and I hit 100. Very sad day. And I hit critical strike rating, which does nothing for us as well. 1 stack of agility blessing on defeat will really only give you cast speed, which increases your movement through the map. But I guess it also makes you cast your chromatic shot more, but it doesn't matter. In case anybody notices this stat, don't worry about it. Let's go into our talent trees. We're starting with Goddess of Darkness. Go through quick here. So you can put in your skill points, then I'm going to discuss what we put in. So, we start with Plague. 40% chance for your dot damage to spread to nearby targets, which is really good for mapping. But you also get plus 80% dot damage duration, which is scaling your damage. Subtle Impact, which is a very important one. Blur gains the additional effect plus 30% additional dot damage taken by nearby enemies. So now your blur rating is giving you damage. Because you always have 100 blur, you always have the blur gives you that additional dot damage. Then we go to Psychic, another one of the ailment trees. We go for Affliction, plus 10 affliction inflicted per second, and plus 75 affliction effect, which is very relevant to have all the affliction effect we can get because it increases our damage. Then we use more with less for that additional dot damage. The additional dot duration feels kind of bad, but that gives us a lot of damage. We don't want Reap Purification at all because it'll lower our overall damage, because it removes all the dot damage from the targets. And then until we hit them again, they have nothing happening to them, and we lose so much damage it's unreal. Warlock, go through this real quick for you. I'm 95, so it's not like a level 100. Vile, duration of ailments caused by critical strikes is doubled, plus 1% ailment damage per 3% critical strike damage. Honestly, I guess you just want crit chance. I guess critical strike damage. I haven't really messed around with the scaling on this. But the duration of ailments will be big. This won't really do much for you because your main skill doesn't do your ailments. And cooldown recovery might be fine, but it's not really scaling anything for us. And then obviously Dirty Tricks. Like I said, this was one of my the things I thought of for creating the build, because we need to get all of the ailments on our targets. So we did skills, equipment, talents. I guess I will show you my pack spirits quick, which I haven't spent money on pack spirits. I've bought the 2 season passes and just sort of played enough to get as many rolls as you can get by playing the game for free, so don't be discouraged if you don't have the pack spirits I have. I always use Happy Chonky on my damage, basic damage one, just to give gives a bonus to Flame Elementium drops, I believe. Yeah, no Flame Field drop quantity. So he just sits over there. I don't use anything he gives me. I just use all the damage. We got this guy who increases dot damage, ailment chance, and damage affliction, which we don't actually take any of the ailment chance because we have a 100% chance to cause ailments. We actually take the elemental resistance because we're so starved. But we take dot damage off him, and then the defaults on all of these. And we get, because he's level 6, we get reaping duration for each reap dealt, stacked up to 4 times, which is actually relevant for me. Important thing to note about using a purple pack spirit, you get an extra pack node, plus the pack point I get from being level 2. So I get 2 just like a level 6 blue, a level 2 purple is just as useful. And if I was to use a legendary, which I don't have an ailment one, it would give me 2 pack nodes. It'd be just like using a level 6 blue, plus you get the buff, but I don't have a relevant legendary. This guy increases dot damage, skill duration, and affliction damage. I use all of his, all in the inner and outer, and then obviously additional drop quantity. So, now to show the damage. The thing about this build is if I stand on it, my damage will be higher. I can get it up to about 500 million after it gets stacked up. And this is with all 3 projectiles hitting the same target, which you have to be right on it for, which is not exactly something that you can manufacture always. Because of that weird chromatic shot, all 3 can hit the same target. But yeah, okay. But real quick, I'm going to show the damage where if I was never to touch my target, but stay nearby for the reaping. I can't remember, I think it's about 200 million, which you can weave in and out and increase damage beyond this, but this is just basic. If you're nearby your target, you'll deal, oh, it's over 300 million, I guess. So, nothing crazy strong, but the build works out about as good as you can get without being a pure wilt build. I'll do a quick T7 map just to show how pleasant it is to do with the 1-button mapping, and then I'll wrap up this video. Where do I have the most? We're going to do the full clear pathing for this one. I probably should have killed that guy, oh well. Keep in mind, if you tried to edit this to not use cast while channeling, you wouldn't get the constant 100% blur, and you would have to completely change the build, or you wouldn't have 100 blur rating, as mine fluctuates between 94 and 100. And there you go. That's a T7 map. Pretty playable build. Goes really quickly through the maps, has good movement speed. Damage does not get as high as I want, did not get it up to 1 billion, and I'm having issues getting the corrosions on the gear that I have because the helmet's too expensive, and I'm just not hitting it on the claw. So I've done about all I want to do with this because there's no guarantee it gets up to 1 billion. I hope you guys enjoy it. Till next season.